Hello, my dear friends, colleagues, students, people of the earth. It's a great day today. And I'm happy to be here again with you with episode 3 of Africa Centered Ancestral Healing. Today, we're going to pick up with and look a little at thought disorders, which is where we sort of left off in episode 2. Again, this is outlined in my book. This is chapter 3, and this is called Africa Centered Ancestral Healing. It is on Amazon.com. And again, if you purchase a ticket to the conference, you will get a discount on the conference ticket plus the book, an autographed copy. So you'll get more information about that at the end of this episode. But picking up on thought disorders, we were talking about trauma. There was something in England in 1913 introduced called the Mental Deficiency Act. And that was where they were looking at, again, caste systems or people that, were not standard to other people's ways of thinking. And that also gave birth to thought disorders and eugenics. They identified these people in the act as being poor, disadvantaged, idiots, imbeciles, feeble-minded, and they used eugenics as a foundation to support that. And that, as you well know, played a big role in the Holocaust. So Dr. Kraepelin, Emil Kraepelin, a German psychiatrist, he said that the ideas is a thought disruption frequently correlated with what he was a psychiatrist, dementia, depression, and schizophrenia. And today we still are not understanding what that is. In 1859, Dr. Arledge wrote a book, and he proposed this done after a brief essay on the curability of insanity as a means of judging what may be done to mitigate the evil. He said, "We shall review the present provisions for lunatics, point out its defects, and suggest various remedial measures calculated in us to improve the condition of the insane." So what we mean when we say insane? Well, according to Dr. Bynum, he notes that the indigenous belief system would be considered something insane. He also noted that Sigmund Freud and Carl J. Jung's libraries were flooded with African artifacts and information that showed the common African belief healing system and ancestral relationships. Dr. Bynum also explained that Freud said, "The oldest human soul is an African soul." And this is where he began to work on the collective unconscious. As they continue to look at these different levels, I would pose the question to you today. What are your family beliefs about identity crisis? And how have your family beliefs influenced you traumatically? How many times have we grown up or in the neighborhood said so-and-so was crazy? Was the person really crazy because maybe they talked to themselves? Or were they crazy? Well, what is crazy? Or is it because we don't understand? If we look at the animal kingdom, how can animals relate to humans when they don't speak the language? Is it a thought process? Or is it something coming from the inside that we don't understand? Just watch Animal Kingdom sometime. There is even a part on YouTube you may want to look up or you may not. I do these silly things sometimes, but I find it so amazing. The cat and the baby chickens. So the mother chicken or rooster or whatever wants its babies back from the cat because the cat is nursing the baby chickens. Does the cat know that those aren't kittens? The mother chicken knows that that's not kittens and wants her babies back. It is hilarious. My point being is miscommunication, how we think. So that brings me back to, what do you believe? How do you identify? It has a lot to do with the genome, which is the unknowing force, the DNA. And then DNA, it consists of, as we know, the basic grade school science, 23 pairs of chromosomes. But then there's something more to it now. The DNA types, there's junk DNA, and this organization, ENCODE 4, did a significant 5-year project on it. It's looked at as the spiritual DNA. It's called that because they don't understand what that means, which is the point of chapter 3. The other is the ghost DNA. And a professor at UCLA in the Department of Computer Science and Human Genetics, his team, they analyzed genetic materials and they came up with a project of 405 West Africans. And Sakararaman is his name, Dr. Sakararaman. He pointed out that they used a statistical model to flag the DNA and learned that this ghost DNA that they had named as a 9 series DNA, it was unusual and it was found in West Africa. It was not associated with Neanderthals or Denisovians, but to a group of Yoruba people 1.5 billion years ago. Imagine that. He said, contended, this is on page 90 of my book, he said, the resilience of those archaic Yoruba Africans who disappeared over 1.5 billion years ago points to a resilient strand within the 9 series DNA. Now, Dr. Charles Finch, a medical and comedic scholar, he said that when a population is being investigated, an adequate sample of people is classified according to phenotypes. The gene and genotype frequencies can be computed from the phenotype percentages. Dr. Finch, who's retired, said, physicians were instructed in the per-Ankh, that's the Ankh, we know what the Ankh is, or House of Life, that served as a combined education inclusive of medical schools, temples, and seminars. The priests and healers were guided by Imhotep. That is the beginning of medical science. Dr. Onyiwuini, a African scholar, and he said, even though the primordial civilizations came entirely from the increasing infusion of blood from Black ethnicities, European scholars came to conclusions without ever having visited Africa. He went on to describe Kemetic teachings based on, again, nature and the cosmos, the cosmological concepts of the Bantu people. And likewise, Dr. Finch talks about the Dogon people of West Africa, which is sort of the Senegal area. Now, Dr. T. Owens Moore is a biological psychologist, and he built on the theory of melanin. And in terms of experimental research, he says that specific conscious or subconscious stimuli motivate an intricate process in a three-dimensional manner. It is spiritually driven for soul elevation, to create a balance between human beings, the cosmos, and nature. And Dr. Moore goes on to talk about neurological research outcomes and how melanin plays a major part in it. Without getting too deep into the DNA, the genome and genetics, I want to kind of move on because you can read that chapter and it's more scientifically based. I would encourage you to go to Ancestry.com, and many of these sites, they have classes, but a place that really does a lot of in-depth work in terms of the African descendants. I don't like to call them descendants, but ascendants. Is you can find it with the Pan-African Center, CENTRE, of thought, which is in London. And that information is also available online, and you can YouTube that, or you can contact us and we can connect you with that organization. So when we talk again about the genome and the DNA and how we get here, I hope that this somewhat helps you to understand how we look at ancestral healing. Everyone's going to have a different experience about it. And everyone's experience is correct. I mentioned in the last episode that I would talk about freedom, free will, and the will to be free. What does that mean? Are we talking freedom from thought? How do we discipline ourselves to respect each other? How do we discipline ourselves to have a meaningful, healthy discussion about what has happened minimally as to the solution now? What do we want future generations to know? Okay, and as I was mentioning in the last episode, each episode will feature one of our speakers or someone that has been a speaker in our conferences. And the infamous, there's no way to introduce Dr. T. Owens Moore. He is the author of Pigment Power. He has a publishing company. He's at drmoore.com. He also has co-authored with Dr. Bruce Bynum, Why Darkness Matters. Maybe 4 or 5 books. I can't name them all, but Dr. T. Owens Moore picked up and was inspired, motivated by Dr. Richard King, whose book I believe it was in the, might have been 60s, 70s, The Black Dot. And Dr. Moore, I call him the traveling psychologist, is a dear colleague. And he's just an awesome teacher. And I call him the traveling psychologist because he's not one that just reads books. He actually goes to these places. I'll let you hear a little bit from him about what he thinks about the benefits of ancestral healing, the Africa Centered Ancestral Healing Conference, and why he contributes every year.
My first invitation was in 2016 to present at the Ancestral Healing Conference. And my experience was pretty much overwhelming because I had never been to the Pacific Northwest. Did not know there was that level of consciousness in the Pacific Northwest. How it got here, that's an interesting dynamic because I'm not from the area, but to see that. Bookstores, African Village, people with different knowledge, skills, and sets, providing an environment for people who don't know anything about psychology. Because many of the people that I met were not really into the area. They were just coming because they had a hub of people that were here in the area of Seattle that made it conducive to learn about themselves. In the midst of it, since we're dealing with ancestral healing, it's about how do we work on ourselves? How do we now honor that past? And that's what everybody in Seattle was doing. And so to see it in this community, this environment, this small, I would say small because it's not like a large conference. We have hundreds of people, 200, 300, which means you take away from the family environment. So what I felt the first time coming was really family. Asking for answers, asking for a way to find a solution to the problems that we are going through. And if you don't go in the past, you don't seek the past to find some answers, you're not going to have any answers.
We've had some outstanding scholars and celebrities to speak at our conference. And this one coming up, the 10th anniversary, is the most sacred one. But I do want people to think about and go and explore, examine, ask questions to those elders in your family that are still living while they are. Love each other. Family is important. Today it's just so divided. You have the family divided, right? And then you have the division among people. We don't have the answers to why, but can we make a difference? We can make a difference. How many of us could sit down and say, oh, well, I don't know. Teach me. That's my position. Teach me. Help me understand. That is the feedback. Now walk by faith and not by sight. So again, from my heart to yours, I send out good vibrations and love and peace. And I hope to see you at the conference this year in Seattle, Washington. Hit the like button if you like what you're hearing. Let me know if you want to hear something else. And subscribe.